Rahmiati, and second Ikbal Maulana, and the third is Halimatus'sadiah. Actually, we are consisting of 4 members, but unfortunately, the one is has another agenda, so only 3 of us that appear online in this presentation. So we begin our presentation by showing you the structure of presentation. The first one, we would like to describe how Ummah and its relationship in Indonesian politics. And the second, how Ummah and Islamic populism movement in Indonesia. And the third is how Ummah shift from the street to digital campaign movement and its consequences for recent election. So those three factors is relate how the influence of digital media affect the Ummah movement, and how the ulamas also use this platform to persuade their followers to join the street movement. And this latter intention eventually back to the candidate that run for the election. So that's the aim of the presentation that we would like to present today. And the first thing is how we understood Ummah in this context. Actually, the term of Ummah is recently arose in Indonesian politics, especially when the rallies of Islamic movement began in 2017. As you can see on the screen, that it was begun by the statement from Ahok that mistakenly interpreted one of the Quran verses in 2017. So that's evoked, that's trigger up the anger and the emotion of the Islamic people, that they collectively begin to move as the Ummah. So that's the brief explanation of Ummah in Indonesia, especially in from 2017 until now. However, we should realize that the term of Ummah is not exactly new. Previously, we already see that the same movement already did in Indonesia, especially after the fall of Suharto in the early 2000, that we see that many, or not many, several group of Islamic fraction, or maybe we can call it conservative, begin to push forward some Islamic agenda. For example, alcoholic drink ban or gambling ban. I'm sorry. So those two of example is were the example how the Ummah already appear in public spaces. However, we should also realize that the previous Islamic fraction did not get much attention from the other Muslim, especially from the traditionalists or maybe from the modernists, because it just done by some small Islamic fraction, especially based in urban area. However, when we see at Ahok case, when it comes to the 2017 release agenda on behalf of Civilisational Islam or Islamic Defense Action or something else, we can see that those movement was successful to attract Muslim across mazhab or maybe across theological line, that eagerly join the Islamic populism rallies. And more importantly, by designing Ahok as the non-Muslim or maybe Christian, that set up, he was the most public enemy for Muslim at that time. So that make up or set up the black and white perspective for the most Muslim that joining Islamic movement at that time. However, we should also understand the big picture of movement in Indonesia, especially when we use Islamic populism framework. Compared with the Indonesian context, we take a note the two noticeable argument that we said here. The first one is it shows that Ummah is part of the sympathetic relationship with the previous globalism movement. We can see that from pan-Islamism movement until ISIS, the Ummah has been flourishing in different platforms. And most importantly, the noticeable terms that regarding Ummah, for example, Caliphate and also pan-Islamic movement. And the second thing, the Ummah means the collective group of Muslim society. So this applies for the domestic politics where the Islamic group or maybe the Islamic follower has been outside of the government. So this the latter terminology would be main focus of our presentation in this context. And what we can see from the shift from the Islamic agenda and now focus on the electoral process. So it was started in 2017 and also began developed rapidly in 2019 presidential election. We can see that the shift that focus on the electoral process is taking different with the globalism, the Islamic movement in other world. I mean, in this case, compared with the other global populism that accuse Western as the source of inequality, the Indonesian context show that they seem to scapegoating the minorities, especially Chinese, that because the main source of wealth is predominantly occupied by Chinese, for example. And also, unlike with the global Islamic movement who concentrate in populism and moral issue, the Islamic movement that take place in Indonesia show that they have been long advocating for the Muslim leader. So they always design someone that may be eligible for the Muslim leader. So that's the main aspiration of Islamic populism movement right now. So in this case, also set up the intention that is not again advocating Islamic agenda, but advocating for the Muslim leader that may be relevant for the Islamic populism movement in Indonesia. And this is the example of how the shifting, how the Ummah shift from the street digital campaign and those consequences in the recent election. As you can see on the screen, that we notice, or maybe we can perceive that these three recent election, 2017 Jakarta election, 2019 Indonesia president election, and also the current election also show how the personal issue is more imminent rather than populism itself. So we can see that the polarization has been settled down. However, at the same time, the personal issue, how they idolize or maybe how they popularize certain figure, and we can call it Muslim leader here, is more apparent in public spaces. So we already did some preliminary digital research in TikTok or maybe Instagram or maybe YouTube, that we saw the comment from various netizens has different opinion that may be affiliate with the certain figure. So that's the shift we want to express in this presentation. And I think for the rest of the presentation, I will pass to my colleagues here, Pak Ikbal Maulana. Pak Ikbal, are you ready? Are you ready now?
Yes, Mas
Yes.
Wasis.
Okay, over to you, Pak Ikbal.
Okay, thank you. In this figure, we compare the data between the 2019 presidential election of 2019 and 2024. And the data is collected from comments from YouTube video, short YouTube video from the previous election and 2024 elections. And then we compare some keywords, so some related Islamic keywords such as Islam, Ummah, Iman or faith, Akidah, akhirat, hereafter, hell, heaven, azab. And then we compare from the data from two data sets, and we see that there is a drop in the frequency in the word Islam's umat or even azab. So it seems that religious discourse is no longer dominant because the public, particularly on social media, more focus on the conflict between Jokowi and Gibran on one side, and PDIP and Megawati on the other sides. So for example, there are a lot of comments that mentioning the act of Jokowi or Gibran as betrayal to PDIP, and this is, for example, the popularity of Aksi 212 or 212 Action Movement, and also Reuni 212. For example, in the previous election, 212 was very popular, but now not many people are attracted to mentioning these words. And also ijtima, even though there was still ijtima in this 2024 election, but could not get public attention. So the attention of the public is no longer to the same issue as in 2019 elections. That's Mas Wasis.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Ikbal, for following up the slide that focus on the YouTube comments that specifically express how the different opinion on YouTube can be affiliated with a certain figure. And to wrap up or to conclude our presentation today, we would like to address three things. The first one is the populist Islamic movement on behalf of Ummah in Indonesia doesn't follow the same pattern with the global Muslim movement. So as I mentioned earlier, that compared with the global Islamic movement that focus on the Western as the main source of inequality, or maybe Western as the source of injustice. In Indonesia, focus on how to blame the minorities as the source of populism movement. And the second thing is, although instead of focusing on the Islamic agenda, especially caliphate or something else, in Indonesia, it has been long advocating for the Muslim leader in every electoral campaign session. So in every campaign period in social media, it always been arousing some tweets or maybe some posting that focus on the how Indonesia should have Muslim leaders, for example. And the third and the last, the digital expression might be declining. However, the followers, I mean the Islamic populism movement followers, still remain vibrant in public spaces, in online or offline spaces. I think these three things wrap up our presentation today. Thank you for thank you for the time and looking forward to hearing back from committee and the participant here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
I'll hand over to Ihsan in the room.
Thank you, Susan. So let's move to our second paper by our Deakin team, Hasnan, Kainat, and Chloe. This time Hasnan is leading the paper, and he will present.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor, for allowing us to collaborative research. It's authored by me, Kainat, and Chloe, supervised by our great supervisor, Professor Islamist. And yes, it's about the FDI's instrumentalization of informal religious law for its civilizational populist mobilization in the 2024 elections in Indonesia. It's funded by the Australian Research Council, ARC, under Discovery Grant, DP1, Religious Populism, Emotions and Political Mobilization, Civilisationism in Turkey, Indonesia, and Pakistan, 2022 and until 2025. So the Defenders Front of Islam, or Front Pembela Islam, was formed in 1998 in Indonesia and disbanded in the end of 2020, but it was re-established in the early of 2021 by changing its name, logo, platform, etc. to become the Islamic Brotherhood Front, or Front Persaudaraan Islam. Its new version, the new FPI, has been ideologically same, totally same with the old one. In terms of its involvement in the contestation of practical politics in Indonesia, as Ikbal mentioned before, declining, but the FBI was seen as still influential in the context of the complex political dynamics in the country, in which the FBI faces political difficulties. For example, it was banned its activities, including its in social media and more broadly in cyberspace, was prohibited by the police. I don't know, it's kind of a practice of digital authoritarianism by the ruling government, and 6 of its laskars were killed by the members of the police, and its grand imam, Imam Besar Habib Muhammad Rizik Sihab, that's full name, was imprisoned, then released on parole. And the FBI is still very important extra parliamentary political force that can have a strong impact on the 2024 election. So the FBI is well known as the Islamist, but intolerant movement, Islamist populist, vigilante movement, and etc. But Prof. Ihsan and Prof. Barton described in detail that in the ideological expression of the FBI's Islamist populism, there is the use of a civilization-based categorization to identify the self and its populist enemies, ultimately referred to as Islamist civilizational populism. The FBI perceives that the elites are not only the enemies of the pure people, but also who are in cahoots with the dangerous others who belong to the social and cultural identity of a certain civilization that's considered threatening to the civilization of the people. While scholars have enthusiastically investigated the driving forces behind the emergence of this type of religious populism, there is Vadis 2016, Vadis again 2018, Vadis and Robinson 2017, Misner 2018, Misner and Muhtadi 2018, Aspinall and Misner 2019, Misner 2020, and others have developed theoretical categories. Yilmaz 2023, quite new book, has extended his analysis to the mobilization aspect of populist politics, in particular the empirical explanation of of how religion becomes a political instrument that supports populism. But it's my critical voice, Prof.
Yeah.
Regarding
I'll
the
see
issue,
later.
regarding the issue of what specific elements of religion are significant in the process of political instrumentalization that supports populist mobilization remains a gap to be filled. So we investigate the Sharia elements of Islamisms that the FBI's activists custom as the main ideological core of their populist contents. We also analyze these elements within the theoretical framework of informal religious law, which applies in the context of Muslim society. Accordingly, our study focuses on how the FBI instrumentalizes informal religious law to support its Islamist civilizational populist mobilization. Our research was based on qualitative data collected in the 6 months leading up to the election on 14 February 2024 until 15 March of that year. This time frame refers to the bulk of the political campaigns where political lobbying takes place until a month after the election, when critical voices emerge on the crucial issues of fraud, political fraud. This data consists of the speeches of the FBI leaders, especially its main figures, Muhammad Rizik Shihab, Muhammad Hanif Alatas, Muhammad Hussein Alatas, and others, and press releases published on its website, propaganda articles, political statements disseminated through its social media, especially Telegram and YouTube. The data were analyzed using the civilisational approach to populism, elaborated with the theory of informal religious law. And accordingly, we specifically look at the informal religious law that we identify its embodiments as the discourse of Sharia, fiqh, and fatwa. Then we look at the context of the informal religious law embodiments that can enrich our understanding on the FBI's empirical situation. We also analyze the ways in which the FBI constructs and delivers the informal religious law, which is combined with certain political messages. Okay. In terms of the theory that I use, based on Yilmaz and Morrison's theory, 2023, the civilizational populism is a group of ideas that together considers that politics should be an expression of the general will of the people and society to be ultimately spirited into two homogeneous and antagonistic groups, the pure people versus the corrupt elite, who collaborate with the dangerous others belonging to other civilizations and who present a clear and present danger to the civilization and way of life of the pure people. By informal religious law, we mean a legal entity or set of the formal legal system of a state, and the people of that state uphold and respect this law as it governs all aspects of their life. So in the context of Muslim societies, it is a Sharia, fiqh, and fatwa. Okay. The current election presents a contest of practical politics, with Prabowo teaming up with Jokowi's son Gibran Rakabuming against Anies Baswedan, with Muhammad Iskandar, Ganjar Pranowo with Mahfud MD, and this is quite complex. And the FBI, as an extra parliamentary force, decided to support Anies Muhaimin. The support shows the consistency of the FBI's political preferences for candidates who are seen as pro-civilizational Islamist populism and on the side of the Ummah. Rizik Shihab said that Anies Muhaimin has the support of the Ijtima Ulama. He advised Muslims to vote for the candidate chosen by the Ulama. Rizik Shihab said, if we ask Ulama about everyday matters and make Ulama our place of inquiry, we should also ask ulama about choosing leaders. The FPI support for Anies Mohaimin is strengthened by the political frauds allegedly committed by the Prabowo Gibran camp, especially through Jokowi's political power. And this include perpetuation of Jokowi's political dynasty, legal manipulation by the Constitutional Court, and then abuse of authority and power as a state official, and vote counting fraud. Okay. The FBI bases its political decision on the findings of the Ijtima Ulama, an institution made up of ulama with Islamist ideologies from different regions of Indonesia, who are tasked with carrying out a collective ijtihad. Ijtihad means Islamic legal reasoning in the political sphere. Rizik Sihab stated that the political decision must uphold the principle of a deliberative consultation, musyawarah in Bahasa Indonesia and syura in Arabic, as a religious commandment. So there is a legal dimension within it, based on the passage, the Quran, Surah Ali Imran, and deliberatively consult with them in all important matters. وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. The phrase "and deliberatively consult with them" is seen as a command from God in the scripture as a very important part of Sharia, which contains an element of obligation to fulfill it. So the Ijtima Ulama Forum, attended by ulama and leaders from various regions, was held at the Azikro Mosque, Sentul, Bogor on 18 November 2023. In the forum led by Kiai Haji Muhyiddin Junaidi and moderated by the FPI chairman Muhammad Hussein Alatas, and the ulama listened directly to the presentation of Anies and Mohaimin political vision and mission. And the forum resulted in a decision by the Ijtima Ulama to support Anies Mohaimin in the 2024 presidential election. They demanded that this endorsement to be understood as a religious trust. Amanah Ijtima Ulama, which based on Sharia principles, implies a legal obligation to comply with it and not violate it. On 13 December 2023, Anies Mohaimin signed integrity pact between them and the Ijtima Ulama, which contained 30 points, the essence of which was they must side with the Ummah and at the same time fight the enemies of the Ummah, emphasizing that they are anti-secularism, Islamophobia, terrorism, separatism, imperialism, communism, Marxism, Leninism, religious blasphemy, immorality, LGBTQ+, prostitution, alcohol, drugs, and others, Zionism, racism, fascism, corruption, collusion, nepotism. And it also emphasizes this collection of like a supermarket of bad things. It also emphasizes their support for the ulama, moral revolution, economic sovereignty of the people, support for the poor, human rights. Imagine that they support for human rights, that Western human rights, especially civil and political rights and land reform. Based on this Ijtima Ulama result, and since the signing of the Integrity Pact by Anies Mohaimin on December 2023, until a few days before the election, 7 February 2024, the FBI ideologue, Hanif Alatas, had campaigns to mobilize the masses in various regions such as Jakarta, Banten, West Java, Central Java, Palembang, Riau, East Kalimantan. In his campaign, he called for the same thing. Ready to follow the comment of the ulama, ready to follow the ulama who are highly consistent, istiqomah, ready to follow the direction of the Ijtima Ulama. We obey the Ijtima Ulama. 2024, Anies becomes the president. Takbir. So finally, on 8 February 2024, the FBI held an Istighosah Kubro. This is the populist event. Religious gathering at Benjamin Sueb Stadium, Kemayoran, Central Jakarta, which was attended by tens of thousands of people. At this moment, Rizik Sihab called for the election to be direct, general, free, and secret as well as honest and fair in order to create peace. He also warned that they were ready to fight if there was any fraud in the election. So since, according to the FBI, there has been a political fraud, especially committed by the Prabowo Gibran party supported by Jokowi, the FBI mobilizes the masses to fight against the fraud. Rizik Sihab calls on the masses to fight the political fraud that is taking place, while at the same time building mass confidence that the pure Ummah can win against Ahok in the 2017 gubernatorial election, even though it was not supported by a large political force. So the text is quite long. Yeah. Okay. Well, because of that, if you want Anies Mohaimin to win, that's why I invite you. Let's fight fraud. Don't be afraid if there are other candidates supported by economic power, political power. We have experience in Jakarta. In Jakarta, when we fought Ahok, what did we have? Ahok was supported by the president, supported by the chief of police, Kapolri, supported by the TNI commander, supported by all mainstream TV media, supported by major parties. This is very important. Supported by Taipan conglomerates. This is the civilisationism. Yeah. Supported by 9 Dragon, which means China. Supported by survey institutions, brothers. Those who supported Anies at that time were only parties, brother, whose votes were actually not as big as the parties that supported Ahok. Ahok was backed by foreign powers, brother. On paper, Ahok won. But what happened after that? It turned out that God's will was different. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala still forced Ahok to resign. The Muslims won, brother, right? Takbir. If we obey Allah, we don't have to worry. In tansurullah yansurkum. If you defend Allah, uphold His law. Once again, uphold His law. Uphold His Sharia. Yansurkum. Surely Allah will win you all this. Allah's promise is true to be true. Allah's promise is impossible to miss, ya ikhwan. So, come to the conclusion.
Great text.
The FBI uses informal religious law as an ideological expression that supports its political mobilization, while the expressions of ideology itself is part of the da'wah effort. So revealing the truth, commanding good, as well as preventing evil and getting closer to God. And from the FBI's political perspective, informal religious law is an instrument that supports their populism. This acts as a religious justification that constantly and convincingly offers only one best option. I just remember that the way of thinking in Islamic legal theory shown by a legal maxim that basically the imperative assertion in Islamic law leads to legal consequence of being obligatory to conduct, and its exception wouldn't be ruled unless the reason that emerges, the reason emerges. So al-aslu fil amri lil wujub wa la tadullu ala ghairi illa bi qarina. That's okay. In Latin, is the act of the law does no one wrong. So actus nemini facit injuria. So this has to do with the legalistic nature of Islamic law, which has nuances of halal and haram, black and white. Meanwhile, according to the FBI's Sharia-centric perspective, politics tend to be positioned as a field of da'wah. Thus, politics must have a religious mission. If there is a concept of Islamic politics, then in this context, it's a Sharia-based populist politics. This conclusion invites a question on the possibility to identify an alternative pattern of the civilisational populist mobilization. So it seems that in the case of the FBI, is showing not only the pattern of instrumentalization or politicization of religion, but also the religionization of politics. Let's see. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Hasnan. This was the fourth paper of the Deakin PhD students team, Chloe, Kainat, and Hasnan. So I only asked them about 3 months ago, as far as I remember, just submit some abstracts for the conference, and they came up with 3-4 ideas. I am involved in one of them only. So 4 papers in 3 months. That's really great. I am proud of you. That's nice. And Hasnan is involved on the 5th one as well. So the next one, Hasnan is the 4th author on the next one. And Nick is leading this, Nicholas Morrison, but his daughter is sick. So I think Susan will present, right? Susan?
Yes, yes.
Okay, over to you, Susan.
Mhm. All right. I'm working across a couple of monitors here, so can you see that?
Yes.
And if I do this, can you see it better?
Yeah, why does...
Or can you now
Okay.
see notes? Maybe I'll leave it like this.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay.
All right, let's go like this. I know that.
Why does my name's place keep changing? Now I'm the 3rd author. I said I'll be the 5th author. I was the 4th, and then you moved it to 3rd. It should be the
Oh,
5th.
here we go. It's what happens with time.
It's growing. Yeah, you're upgrading me. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're a bit well behaved.
I worked hard.
Yeah, you're a bit well behaved. So.
Oh, here we go. How about that?
Yes, that's better. Thank you. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. So last panel, last paper, we are the lucky ones. As Isan said, I am presenting this on behalf of my colleague, Nicholas Morrison, who is leading this paper, but it's a team effort. So we're working also with Anna-Maria Bluch, who is one of our team members from Dundee University, and the event organizers, Hasnan and Isan. So with this paper, we're taking a bit of a shift, I suppose, from the discussions that we've been having, because we want to draw the attention to the use of emotions in Islamist populist articulation, and particularly the emotion of nostalgia in the logic of popular community building. So this follows on from the established consensus that politics is affective and populism is a specific type of affective politics. So our rationale is to understand how populist supporters come to a certain political rationality through their emotional attachments, or in reverse, how their emotional attachments define their political Islamic-oriented rationality. So just briefly, I want to just begin with our approach to populism, just to set a tone to how we arrived to this exploration of nostalgia. So we consider populism a specific form of community building or us creation, whereby the collective or the people are amalgamated through shared antagonism with those who are perceived to be in control of structures and relations of power. And so taking an ontological approach to populism, as I laid out in this very simplistic image, the individual demands characterized here by the D1 and D2 and the D3 that make up the people are defined by and define who and what constitutes the elite, which I have, for sake of argument here, named the subject. So characterized by S1, S2, S3, and so on. So what this inherently means is that the demands and the subjects that constitute the people and the elite are always contingent, and therefore never fixed for populism to be successful. And what we're thinking, and when we're thinking about emotions, they are embedded within these separate demands and these separate subjects, and are constituted in their complexity in the people and the elite. So when the demands or subjects change, these emotions, which are represented here by A1, A2, A3, and so on, remain attached to this, what is called a chain of equivalence, which is important to comprehend because it can explain how certain demands can be articulated and can become popular, because it's informed by the pre-sedimented emotions of, for example, hope and anger, fear, resentment, and also nostalgia. to name some of the more dominant emotive forces in populism. So this approach of populism is embedded in the work of Ernest Laclau. And why we're using this? Because it highlights the diversity through which the people and the elite are constructed, and something that is very obscured by the naming of the people as the people and the elite of the elite. So this means that locating who the people and the elite are becomes essentially a temporal task. And so I think that as scholars of populism, we therefore always tend to be behind in time in understanding who the populists, elite, and the people are. And it is that contingency and latency, which is, according to this approach, the exact strength of popular politics and its appeal as well. So I'm aware that we have very little time, so I'm just going to brush through this one. But what does this mean when we attach this approach to populism, to modern conceptions and manifestations of Islamism? Of course, I want to note here that Islamism is itself a signifier, especially since 2001, and it's conceived and practiced through this hegemonic notion that it's anti-liberal, anti-democratic, and anti-pluralist. So in the most general sense, using the work of Tibi, Islamism is the politicization of Islam and can be characterized by ascribing fixed meaning to Islamic concepts such as Ummah and Sharia, instead of considering these concepts as a relational practice that is spatially and temporally defined. So when we are attaching that to populism, and I want to emphasize here that we're witnessing Islamism in the dominant sense today, we can almost see it, as I try to sort of paint it out here, as the empty vessel. So we see populism as the empty vessel and Islamism that gives the people a tangible identity. So it's the paintbrush that gives color or content and meaning to the people. But that is, of course, the case also with other ideological constitutions of the people, such as nationalism, communism, or fascism. So the people are not specific to populism, but it's a concept of all politics. So what makes Islamist populism then is the applied definition of Islam in the very way people express it through their emotional attachments as negatively defined, meaning by what it opposes. So emotions are key to community building and us creation, because without it, what is left is simple ideas that cannot be embodied and moved, so to speak. So some emotions, as research on populism shows, are more prominent in populist politics, and nostalgia is one of those emotions that has specifically gained a lot of attention in the last 5 years. And this is not surprising, because nostalgia is a useful emotion to link the past with the present and the future. It's both backward and forward-looking in the way that it oftentimes is a lack of what is experienced in the present that is projected onto a mythology of the past. And this lack is useful when formulating a collective identity that is based on deprivation, so someone stole something from us, and a desire for reclaiming that which was lost. So the example being, we will take back what we own or deserve. And so we can have a brief look at the etymology of nostalgia to see this combination of longing for a home, which speaks to a belonging, a connectedness, and a recognition to land people, and the pain that comes with not having that home. So in that sense, there's always a lack when nostalgia is attached to political identity, and that lack is what inspires and the demands for the future. And I'll leave that definition for collective nostalgia just for you to look at. But these pictures, I selected these from the National Archive in the Netherlands, are there to sort of highlight that nostalgia, when attached to populism, is oftentimes not a historical fact, but a mythological reality. In the case of Islamist populism in Indonesia, the construction of the people is not located in the spatial history of Indonesia, say, for example, to the anti-colonial struggle independence, but of Arabia. So we decided to look at a civil society movement instead of an electoral party, justified by our discourse theoretical approach to politics that considers politics to exist in all aspects of society. And we have selected the FBI as a prototypical Islamist populist discursive manifestation. And so this is our key question: how is nostalgia attached to Islamist populism in political commitments of the supporters? So we're really looking not at leadership or at the discourse of the movement, but in how supporters relate to it. I'm just going to leave the methods part because I'm running out of time, but we're basing this on in-depth 59 in-depth interview supporters. So just to the findings section in, what we're finding in this is that FBI supporters organized their people, and Hasnan has already talked about this, around a moral framework of commanding right and forbidding wrong. And this moral framework is informed by Indonesia's growing problem of immorality. So in other words, Indonesia's problems juxtapose Islam's pure and moral past, reaching back to the time when Prophet Muhammad led the Ummah towards a moral future. So it's the 7th century state of Medina that's represented as the moment Islam rescued society from immorality, and is therefore the moment of nostalgia that people return to make sense of today's issues by considering Indonesian society to be located at a similar moral crossroads. So it is, again, not the actual historical facts that define the state of Medina, for example, its political and social constitution, that matters to respondents, but the moral intervention that it symbolizes. And this is evident in the way respondents refer to the state of Medina, which is characterized by a set of actual facts of the time. And this is why we say that it is used as a temporal marker that functions to bind people around what FBI names a moral revolution. This is why the mission of commanding right and forbidding evil is placed here in between the people and the elite, because it informs how the people are defined by their past, their present identity, and their ideal future through what it is not, through what it opposes and what it despises. And with the dotted line, apologies, I try to show that the antagonist of the sinful as a general category, so not as a singular subject position, is necessary to reach the ideal state, which, as our keynote speaker yesterday, Professor Tommy, alluded to when speaking of the impossibility of utopia, has to always remain out of reach. And it is this dynamic in our analysis, rather than the actual content ascribed to commanding right and forbidding wrong, that intact is antagonism, because it can continuously be extended to include more position of sin. For example, Korean popular culture is one sort of new sinful subject position. So participants unanimously express their commitment to a diverse and pluralist Indonesia. And what we're finding here, however, is that this commitment is clashing with their nostalgic investment in an Islamic past and future. So to make this point clear, participants often refer to their value of religious and cultural diversity in Indonesia. It is this tolerance of diversity that makes them proud Indonesians. However, this stance clashes with their nostalgic commitment that prescribes a pure and moral religious identity that opposes un-Islamic practices and identities. And one such example is the staunch opposition to LGBT identities, which is considered the true antithetical opposition to a virtuous Muslim society. We know, however, from orthodox religious politics in other contexts, like the Tea Party in again, the keynote yesterday that Professor Tommy referred to, that such a moral position is common with religious identities. However, in the case of FBI supporters, it's not merely a religious position, although that is what it appears to be by using the term Islamic. It is rather a populist position in that it functions to sediment an antagonism that is occupied by the very many representatives of the West. So LGBT identities are one of them, but the Korean fever, which is what people have been referring to in our interviews, is one other example of being a representative of an immoral order. So it gets extended and moved. So diversity and pluralism is valued, but only under the condition that's guided and informed by Islamic principles, that draw a rigid boundary between what is Islamic proper and what is Islamic improper or improper at. So briefly then, in the discourse of the supporters, nostalgia is placed at the intersection between Islamism and nationalism. So the heroic period of the nation's history, defeating colonialism and subsequently communism, is marked as the binding force of Indonesian identity. So it's nation, culture, and religion that are key signifiers in their discourse. And they're all used to consolidate an opposition against the current hegemonic order that's guiding Indonesia towards a path of immorality. Participants believe that nationalism and Islamism can be practiced side by side, with the example of Arabization being desired as a means to return to the homeland of Prophet Muhammad, yet locating this at the cultural interface of modern Indonesia. And this is why we argue that nostalgia enables a return to a past that is unconnected to the spatial coordinates of the nation. It's not in Indonesia, but it's in Arabia, precisely because it's far away and unconnected from the soil of the Indonesian archipelago. So put differently then, it's the spirit of the nation that is the beholder of tolerance, difference, and pluralism that can provide the conditions for an identity that's grounded in a nostalgic imagination of an ideal Islamic state and an ideal Ummah rooted in empathy, solidarity, and compassion. I'm just thinking about time, and I might just skip this part, which is referring to people's responding to digitized life through, again, another example of through this emotion of nostalgia. I'm just aware that we have a keynote starting in 5 minutes. So just briefly then to conclude, what we're arguing is that the nostalgic reimagination evident in the supporters is an evocation to critique the present by establishing a new people who are committed to a displaced idea of the past, to embed an antagonism that is broad enough to include a wide range of ideas and people, and narrow enough to ensure the contradictions that come with such diversity are easily overcome. And secondly, it's Islamist populist supporters and their expression of nostalgia for former people and former states that is pluralist in imagination, but exclusive and narrow in its conception of Muslimhood. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you. Until Vadis joins us, let's continue with the Q&A, and also keep the questions coming, please, in the chat function or just verbally, because when working on the papers, presenters, co-authors can work on the basis of these questions. Any questions from the audience? Any feedback, comment?
That's from Maria.
Maria, okay.
To Mas Wasis and Tim, do you think there will be another Islamic populist movement under Prabowo's regime in the next 5 years? Or their time is over and probably emerge in another type of religious movement?
Yes.
Actually, it goes to Mas Hasnan as well, if possible, to answer. Thank
okay,
you.
and also if Greg can respond to that, that would be great too. Yeah. Yes, Wasisto, let's start with you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Isan, for the opportunity, and thank you for the question. So regarding your question here in the chat book, we believe that it depends on the political accommodation that Prabowo will offer to the Islamic fraction. Because if we look at the current Jokowi era, the conservative is being excluded from his administration for 10 years. So that's why the populist movement has been flourishing during a decade. But if Prabowo administration would like to embrace them, or maybe include them in the administration, maybe the Islamic movement will be finished. But I guess it's still uncertain right now to see whether the Islamic movement will be rose again in the next 5 years, because it depends how the regime or maybe the next regime whether they would like to accommodate or disband the Islamic faction in the next administration. I think that's all from us, Prof. Isan.
Thank you. Hasnan, very briefly.
I don't think that the political camp within the Jokowi's administration that involved in the disbandment of the FBI is coming from the Department of Defense, which is under the control of Prabowo, but another division maybe. That's why I just think about maybe just make them not quite big, not quite significant, yeah, but not to destroy them. Yeah, because there will be attacking him as committing what's that human rights violation again, again and again and again.
I see.
Yeah, that's why.
Greg, any response?
Yeah, I think I mean, Front Pembela Islam was the purest expression we've had of Islamist populism in Indonesia. And for a moment, in late 2016, early 2017, it looked like it was going to be a political force. But at the end of the day, it doesn't have enough popular support. So it represents a section of society. The question is where it goes in terms of political alignment. So in Anis's campaign, he did a very good job of sort of trying to rehabilitate himself, and in the process of the groups like FBI that had traveled with him, and setting a kind of a reasonable face. So you could imagine, depending on the coalition, if they feel they're accommodated in government, that would dissipate, their sort of desire to be disruptive. If they're not accommodated in government, then they can be a spoiling force, but they won't be so large. I mean, they're going to be there, but they're not going to be large enough to change things around unless there's some sort of crisis.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you all panelists. Let's give them a round of applause. Please, keep sending your questions to the presenters, co-authors. You have their email addresses. So we'll just conclude the final panel, the 8th panel of our conference, and move on to our next keynote speaker, second keynote speaker. Welcome, Vedi.